Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, April 15th, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, well, I want to continue with part two in my series looking into the accounts of the quote unquote giants or large hominids, as I like to call them international, and in this video we're going to cover several accounts from Russia. And it's not only giants that Chris Leslie covers on his Greatest Ancestors Museum website. He also talks about the elongated skull. So it's interesting to see what that relationship might be, because apparently these elongated skull type humanoid creatures existed at the same time that the giants did. So what kind of relationship was there? Maybe we'll do some supposing when we come across it and talk about it a little bit, because I think it does represent something of a particular, um, perhaps. So we'll talk about that when we get to it, but let's start out with this one from Russia. So, pretty standard accounts here from 20th century, which is interesting as well. Many of these accounts on Chris's sites are, from the 20th century, not only the Victorian times. And it's also, the claims of the skeptics, of the people during the Victorian times are just out of their minds, according to them. So, it's convenient for them to say that. So, they can just dismiss any evidence of there being any sort of reality to the giants. So here's a 33-inch leg bone from a giant skeleton found by Soviets in the United Press here. So, these are the reports that we get in English, but there's probably with so many other reports. The skeleton of a giant with a skull 33 inches round and a shin bone 33 inches long has been found in the Tian Mountains of Russian Central Asia, north of the Himalayas, the Russian official agency TASS reported yesterday in a broadcast. And so this is just a short report here, you know. 2012 was submitted, and it's showing it from the Washington Post in 1945. So it's 20th century account, and this would be a real giant. This is comments by Chris Leslie, the moderator of the site. This would be a real giant. And Tibia 33 inches indicates a man between 11 and 12 feet. So, he talks about the people who, the methods used to come to these conclusions about how tall this, creature, humanoid, hominid would possibly be. And 11 and 12 feet, I mean, we've already heard in the accounts other estimates by experts saying that these 12 footers and whatnot would be like a ton. 2,000 pounds. So, talking about, some seriously large um, creatures, powerful creatures. And again, referring to all the megalithic and other stonework done around the planet, appears to be, the further you go in the past, like those excavations in Mexico and South America, when they dig down further, the stonework becomes more precise and more exact and finer craftsmanship all around. And then you see a dividing line between that and what they consider Aztec work or Mayan work or whatever it might be. Again, when they dig further down, it seems to be more sophisticated and more precise type stonework. Okay, and to think about it, all these cultures emulate the previous culture by what they can discern from the ruins that they come upon. And it's, just noteworthy to think about how it may be difficult to discern between two different civilizations that exist, that existed in the same geographic area when the following civilization may have come at some point much later on, somehow emulates that or figures some things out, whether it be, the general shape and construction and whatever it might be. But, you have to think about it that way. Now, how can we discern between the two when the second civilization is emulating the characteristics of the first, which was probably unknown to them, but they did their best, and so it becomes difficult to discern between the two. The line becomes, it's a fine line between the two, and so that must present some difficulty in archaeology, I would imagine. When you want to think about it in broader terms, like we do right here. Laptec giant. Discoveries made by scientists during World War II tend to show that this old Earth on which we live hides many secrets in her breast. Among all the discoveries that said to have been made by Russian scientists is the strangest and eeriest, says the Fort William Times Journal. The report came from Russia that settlements between 25,000 and 100,000 years old had been revealed, and a new island found in the Laptec Sea off northern Siberia. Soviet scientists are said to have dug up fossil remains of a giant whose skull measured 33 inches in circumference and whose shin bone was 33 inches long. Again, 33 inches and 33 inches. I don't know, without getting into too many occult things or whatever. It's just, could this represent just a period or epoch of the giants when they were a certain size? Because it seems that they evolved from much larger sizes down, to what we consider nothing, but not really. With the existence of giant, humans in, at present. I'm going to talk about that later too. Such measurements suggest nothing less than a giant. With a head of such dimensions, he must have had a correspondingly large and strong body to support it. With the shin bone 33 inches long, he must have had a leg length of not less than 6 feet. One can imagine the length of his stride as he moved about in a hurry. It long has been known that fossils indicate unanswerably that at one time animals and reptiles of enormous size lived on our Earth. In such a period, men, in order to survive it all, probably were much larger than modern man. Therefore, the old legends of giants of the past, well, may have had a basis of truth. And it's interesting, that they would dare postulate such a thing. You couldn't do that now, but when this was being written, I guess, still had some control over what you're going to say in an article. Of course, you just, unless it was the Inquirer or something like that, but that's not true. I covered it, Ohio Journal, for example, who covered an article about giants in their area there and thinking about it in more serious terms. So here's somebody thinking about that in the mid 20th century, and no mention of the Bible there. The Pythagoras skull. So here we have one of these elongated skulls, and it's from the pictures from October 6, 2005. And so, how do these elongated skulls figure in with the giants of the past? Because apparently, by the Paracas people and these found around the Black Sea, and I've covered that on my channel before. As a matter of fact, I did a video, Elongated Skulls, Lebanon to Korea, Here's one of these elongated skull type people found in the modern era. Okay, in the 2000, in the 21st century, I believe, and of course there was other elongated skulls covered in this video that I covered from Russia. They're just extremely weird, interesting type skulls, but um, where do these elongated skull uh, humanoid creatures? Because it seems to me, by judging by all the accounts we've covered so far, and you would have to have been following along with all the accounts in the stateside in the Americas here, and go by what we learned from those things, and all these skeletal remains that had horns and horn buds, and in some cases, sort of like tusks and long horns coming out of their arms and legs, like something you would see out of some sort of, fantasy video game kind of, animation type thing, what a, maybe what a warrior class would be. You have to think about it in these terms. Instead of the Anunnaki and the Nephilim terms, maybe let's consider it in these sort of Atlantean terms, or Hyperborea, Lemuria, or Tartaria, whatever it might be. Because again, all our Homo sapien cultures all stumbled upon all these things from the past and just emulated those cultures in some ways or whatever to carry forth whatever they were able to glean out of. In some cases, probably completely made up and wrong and not what the original culture intended. But in some cases, maybe they were able to figure it out. Who knows? But were these different humanoids from, let's say, the Atlantean past, when we know they were tinkering around with genetic engineering because of corn? It's just right there in your face telling you that there was some more previously advanced civilization on this planet. Corn tells you it all in one fell swoop, because it's impossible. Corn is impossible. So I'm sure there was something like that going on in the past, by judging by all these skeletal remains and all the different hominids, even the small ones, and all these things. Something may have been tinkering around with genetics in the past in all different ways, and perhaps the different classes, maybe these elongated skull type humanoid creatures, were a priestly class or a spiritual class, or the shamans of the giant culture class. These civilizations probably resembled more like what Tolkien talked about, and is giving us some truth drops in all of his books and everything about what the past actually was like. Okay, but in not in the complete fantasy style way that he talks about it, but more sophisticated way with people with more technological capabilities and mathematical capabilities, etc. So were these elongated skulls like the priestly class of the giant cultures? Okay, and they also, were only propagated within their class, like the giants did. Like we have evidence of it with the Watusi in Africa in modern times, and the Fiji warriors in the Fiji Islands. So, you know, we would have to consider that these dynamics went on all the time. I mean, you would figure heavily that the giant peoples would take that mantle in the past, being that they're the biggest and strongest, etc., against any other humanoid species, right? That they would take the mantle of, the royalty, whereas the giants of the past, who were the royalty or the priestly class, had these elongated skulls or dolichocephalic skulls, okay, and these, you know, arched craniums, and, others that had all these horns and spikes coming out of were the military class. And you have to think about it in those terms. When you have these different forms, and it don't seem to be, have to be explain the reasons for these things. So, but with corn being present today, and it's just obvious and evident of a more technologically advanced culture existing in the past, or several. Who knows what the past actually is? So, Russian media outlets have recently covered a story about yet another mystery of the ancient period of human civilization when archaeologists discovered plates with drawings in South America. The plates, or the so-called Iggy stones, are about 70 million years old. The drawings show people with disproportionately large heads. There are skulls of the same shape in the local museums, but archaeologists find the elongated skulls in Russia too. In the North Caucasus, the Pyatigorsk Museum of Regional Studies has them on display. Do those skulls have anything in common? And who started the fashion? And this is the thing with Brian Foster, and he's always referring to the Black Sea elongated skulls, the ones that we're referring to here from the Caucasus, etc., about how, the Paracas people probably came from there. That must be the explanation. Why? Because it's the old world there, and supposedly South America is the new world, and that's the only way it could be, just that one way direction. And that's it. Well, I say there's no reason to believe that. There's just no evidence for that whatsoever. And considering that they find more ancient organized societies than anywhere on earth, other than these individual skeletal remains that they may find, they don't have any evidence of culture to find it with them other than the artifacts that they may find with them. They don't find other skeletons or anything, just single finds of these skeletons, etc., not showing culture or anything like that when they dig them up in Europe and elsewhere. But in South America, this is a different story, and this is why the anthropologists and archaeologists down there said, maybe Sumeria isn't the cradle of civilization after all. You see, why would they say that? Okay, and then you find the bigger skeletons in the Americas, and then the similar ones like the Belviga people in Europe that are slightly smaller than them. Okay. So, and all the proliferation of the giant accounts in the Americas just off the hook as compared to what we've heard, so far, even though I believe that there probably were a lot more in every single one of these European countries we've covered so far, including Africa as well, right? So we haven't heard them all, perhaps not reported in the English-speaking press, but maybe to the foreign-speaking press, we don't know. Nobody's collated any of those things or cares to. Because you have this whole religious argument that muffles up the whole discussion about it, and where we can't just look at it from a purely scientific view and with the evidence that we have and see what we can glean from that before we start getting into Nephilim and Anunnaki and everything else and UFOs and blah, 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 blah. There's far more interesting things to discuss here that pertain to the giants that have to do with all the epics that they lived through. And also these elongated skull people. Okay. The Pyatigorsk skull was found at the excavation site at the Kasayat burial ground in the vicinity of Kislovodsk, says Doctor of Historical Sciences Vladimir Kuznetsov, the author of numerous studies of history of the North Caucasus. The skull is part of the culture of the ancient Alani. Approximately, it dates back to the 3rd, 5th century AD. These strange skulls appeared at the same time when the Sarmatian and Alani hordes came around, so they say. Some of the nomads moved for the Caucasus in the 15th century. Researchers have repeatedly proved that the skulls have been deformed on purpose, says Mr. Kuznetsov. Ropes or special blocks were tied tightly around the heads of infants over the temples. The custom went out of fashion by the 17th century. The reason behind the deformation phenomena is still unknown. It is hard to say whether the methods worked effectively or not, since nobody ever conducted scientific experiments regarding the binding of the infants' heads. So here's another thing that I've covered on my channel. I know Brian Forster has talked about it independently of me, because if you just think about it a little bit, their claims go right in the dumpster, because they're trying to say that these cranial types are formed by deforming the head. Okay, so if I take your head right now and block it all up with blocks of wood and all this kind of stuff, yeah, I'm going to deform it into whatever shape it is that the blocks of wood dictate, this conical shape or flat head shape, or, whatever on the skull. But the thing is that the amount of, it doesn't cause them to grow bigger. See, that's the thing. These skeletal remains in the skulls have a certain amount of, internal area there, so many cc's, right? And they appear to be larger than human beings, what we know as human beings, Homo sapiens, right? When we examine our skulls, and our skulls are only contain so many cc's of brain tissue and all that kind of stuff. These are far bigger than that. So no matter how much I deform your head, it's not going to grow bigger. See, that's the thing. So how could it possibly be caused by artificial cranial deformation when these skulls obviously show bigger internal area than just average skull today? You see? So it's impossible. You can't make it grow bigger. It can just deform it. All it can do is deform your head into a certain shape. It's not going to make it grow bigger inside or out. You see? So this whole thing is nonsense. Their argument is nonsense based on that alone. And this is often, whenever they find these odds, because it can't be in their minds. It's just there can't be any other humanoids that ever exist on this planet, despite the fact that they keep on finding new ones all the time. But, forget about that. Let's not talk about the possibilities there, since considering we keep finding these new humanoids all the time, like the Denisovans and the Indonesian little guy there, and a little Lilliputian guy, and they find all these different hominids all the time, but they're not going to take it into consideration. It's ridiculous. It's all nonsense. Okay, they have to explain it away. They're schizophrenic, bipolar, made that way by guys like Alice Herdliska, thanks to the United States, always screwing shit up for all the rest of the people in the world. We took the mantle over from the British and all the rest of the imperialistic countries. Just screw your head up with a bunch of nonsense and double talk and gobbledygook. And you should think two different thoughts and have cognitive dissonance and simultaneously, think two different things simultaneously, opposite things simultaneously. That's just common practice here in a good old USA, where we practice eugenics, and the Nazis admired it so much that they wanted to copy it in their country over there, because we were so successful at sterilizing, retarded people and people who are special needs people and whatnot. We were busy doing that up until like the 1970s, by the way, in some states, because we're good at that too. You know, we don't like your form of fascism. We like our form of it better. It's more sophisticated. Not all that messy stuff in there. 9-foot giant charcoal Russia. And look at this, was a guy who lived in the 20th century, okay, standing next to an average sized guy there in Russia. Now, the Russian giant, the tallest man on earth. And this guy was 9 foot, 2.5 inches. The weight, it seems to be 330 pounds, but I don't know if that's accurate or not. I mean, 330 pounds. I don't know. It looks scribbled in there a little bit, but maybe. But this guy was 9 foot tall. Okay, that's absolutely gigantic. And again, this is, was he from a family? I'd like to know more. And here's some other guys, I think, that were giants there in Russia. Here's another one of these fellows. Picture of the guy. And this guy, Lushkin, as a matter of fact, this is a broken link from Greater Ancestors on Chris's website there. The link's broken, but they reflected in this search of giants in Russia. They also show these weird geological formations, rock formations here. But look at this fellow here, too. There's another guy from Russia, okay? So are these from like families? Because you remember, Lurch from Adam's Family, and I think his brother starred in Moonraker there, the James Bond movie there. He was Jaws there. They got the steel teeth there and whatnot. And it's sort of like a family of giants. And I reflected on that in my own family. I just thought of it not too long ago, was that, my grandfather was 6'5", and he had two sisters, and they were both over 6 foot tall. He came from, one generation out from, European, where they came from in Central Europe over there in the mountains and whatnot. And I remember my aunts there, my great aunts and grand aunts and whatnot, and they were huge ladies. Huge ladies. I used to joke about it all the time. But a lot of these, are, modern day giants, people with giant DNA all over the planet, living into modern times. And this is the elephant in the room. And this is what they're not discussing, and they don't want to talk about, because this whole religious movement, anti-religious movement, proof of the Bible, not proof of the Bible, whatever it is, aliens or blah blah blah, all the rabbit holes, they're going to take it down. And we're not going to get to the real discussion, thinking about all those ridiculous things. There's just absolutely no direct proof for. But what we can see and talk about with all these articles and whatnot to lead us, to an understanding that seems a bit more rational. So I was just showing these. Chris shows these pictures of these guys from Russia who just absolutely huge, 9 foot tall, just incredible. Okay, and is this a gigantism guy? Maybe, we don't know, but these other fellows seem a bit sturdier, maybe, than this guy. I don't know, but does it reflect the giant DNA existing in modern times? Well, I think it does. Just like the Frisians there in Europe, in Germany and Norway over there. Okay, they're still around. Okay, and this is a discussion we'll get into later on about this all Prussian giant soldier army. And just to show some of the giant megalithic things in Russia that possible. Pyramid Daddies, giant megaliths. I mean, who is moving these things around? Seems to be these gigantic things. He's a giant buried with gold coins. Do you need money to where he's going to, or is just good luck for him? Or, they always try to say, well, let's throw whatever in the grave there because he needed it in his next life or whatever it is, or just they just wanted to honor him. Who knows? But so anyway, guys, those were the few accounts from Russia. There wasn't many, but some of the links were broken there, even though I found a picture there of what Chris Leslie was trying to show of these other fellows here from Russia that's just absolutely gigantic human beings or some kind of hybrids. like Andrew Collins talks about, but I wonder if he thinks that they exist in modern times like I do. But something to think about, guys, and think about the elongated skulls. Were this a separate class of humanoid of the time that existed within a culture of multi um, humanoid type hominids? I mean, that's what it seems like to me when because these dates overlap with these civilizations. Okay, the elongated skulls 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Okay, so we're talking about the times of also the giants existing. Okay, when they find these large skeletal remains like the Adena and the Belbeaker people, etc. All right, so we have to think about it in these terms as something much different than what is being described by even the people who look into these things and suppose. We got to do our own supposing here based on what we know already, which is a lot. We've covered a lot of the accounts about the giants already, the majority of them. Okay, we're on the tail end of hearing about the rest of them internationally here, but you have to say to yourself, there's just a completely different past, that more likens to a Tolkien type past going on, although instead of magic, you got a lot of technology and more advanced cultures, maybe going into 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago. How could we possibly know? The surface of the planet seems to be showing signs that it was totally, radically geoformed over and over again. This is why the geology is more complicated than their sort of generalizations that they make about things. And what the Ice Age theory shows is, just a sort of narrow-minded view of sort of a guess at what might have occurred. When now, with our modern means of looking at the planet, we can see much more cataclysmic things going on in the past and maybe the more recent past than we think. So, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed those accounts because it's just very interesting that, just so similar accounts in the Americas and everywhere else. So it just goes on, guys. The giants are everywhere. The elongated skulls are everywhere. Evidence of these different humanoids and body types all over the planet. Phenotypes, morphologies. So a more complicated past than we could possibly ever imagine, and more fantastic than any sort of the Nephilim stories or Anunnaki or even Tolkien. Reality is stranger than fiction, right? So whatever must have been going on in the past with all these humanoid types, and everybody, like, they're all sentient beings. These people live in the past. You have to think that they could think on our level or whatever. Everybody's going to be engaged in things like trade, business, you know, um, partnerships. Those are the things that we do today, right? So why wouldn't it be very similar in the past? Okay, whatever scientific endeavors in similar type ways, but with different technologies that are so far beyond our understanding that we would imagine they'd be alien, right? But not alien, homegrown, right here. Okay, this is why we always thinking aliens first, because we think it's impossible based on the current narrative. It couldn't possibly be, but the current narrative is wrong. So you have to think of it in other terms. In this way, all the Nephilim and Anunnaki stories go out the window before we understand everything that we can possibly understand about the giants in the past. Okay, you have to keep a more open mind about this. Those things are leading you somewhere intentionally to get you off of understanding what possibly could have gone on in the past, and a lot more things, my friends. More than that, many of the things we discuss on this channel here. All right. So anyway, please do hit the like button if you did like the video, and please do subscribe. We discuss some very interesting things on this channel. You should hear them. Okay, if you're only hearing the History Channel and whoever's got 400,000 subscribers and they're just covering mainstream articles about new sites and new discoveries, which are fascinating to me too, but you can almost throw out the narrative that they're going to talk about and everything because it doesn't make any sense. They don't know what the timeline is. They don't know anything. They're guessing. It's all made up. It's fairy tales that they like to think about based on whatever biases they have. All right. Anyway, guys, Bugcat 7 signing out. A peace.